Yum, yum!
Greg here from Pixel Fondue. This little design here is something I saw on a Houdini thread on Twitter. I thought I'll make this in MODO. Gave it some Thanksgiving colors, and yeah, so it's just a series of mesh ops with some particle stuff. And so if you're interested in mesh ops, this is a good one for you. Made another one with like beads. So you see these beads with a string going through it, and that is just the curve rendering that the beads are replicated onto. Here's one from the top. So it's kind of a cool looking thing there. So anyway, we'll go through this. We'll call it MeshOp practice, and yeah, we'll just jump on over to MODO. Okay, here we are in MODO. And the first thing I'm going to do is just rename this empty mesh to curve. We're going to make our curve first, and so select a curve over here and close mesh ops for now. Press X to turn on snapping, and make sure you've got grid snapping there. And so I'm going to snap one at the origin, and then I'm going to snap one at 10 meters on the X. So we want to sort of back up our grid. You can see the grid size changing here. I want to back it up to about where it says 1 meter. So now it's really hard to see this in advanced viewport. Let me just go to default real quick. Each of these grid lines, still probably hard to see, so is a meter. So we'll just go to 10 here. And Q to drop the tool. And I'm just going to press X to turn off snapping. And if I select that point, if I want to make sure it's at 10, I can always just go over here to stats and take a look and see that here on X it's at 10. So that's good. Looking at it from the front, I'm going to select them both, press W for move. I guess I could have just done this in the first place, but I'm going to snap it up a ½ meter. So push in a little bit so the grid's at a ½ meter, press X to turn on snapping, and we'll just push them up. So they're offset from the origin. That'll be important in a second here. Okay, so pop open, we're done with our direct modeling tools, so let's pop open our MeshOp stack over here. And the first one I'm going to add is just a curve rebuild to give us some points on the curve. So just curve rebuild. 20, the default is probably fine. I'll just bump it up to 40 just to give us some more points to play with. And then I'm going to add a radial array. And so radial array, we want it to be on the x-axis like this, and so now it's on X, and you can see why we offset our curve up, because the radial array starts at the origin, right, or starts at 0, 0, 0, and so we moved our curve up a ½ meter, so it's all curving around, and now we have sort of a, if I look at it from the right, this sort of like a meter in diameter, right? So you know, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 ½ meter, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 ½ meter at 100 meters or 100 millimeters there. So looking good. Moving on, let's turn our count to 24, like that. Turn off verts there. And then we're going to do some procedural weight maps. So I'm going to look at it from the front, or the right actually. Right or the front? Turn on verts. Okay, now we can see it. Turn off the grid. We just have these verts here. You know, I'm just going to change, sorry, let me change the display options, add draw options, and my mini props here, wireframe to user, wire color to like green or something, so you guys can actually see what's going on here. Much better. Okay, so let's look at it from the right, and we're going to do some procedural weight maps now. I'm going to press O for viewport options initially, and just under active meshes, turn on show weight maps or weight map values, so we can kind of see those once we start putting them on there. And I'm going to select the vertices first, and then I'm going to add the mesh op. And the reason I'm doing that is it'll take the selected vertices and create a select by index selection op sub tool there for me without me having to do it manually. So let's select every fourth one. So 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Good. Okay. So create, actually, yeah, create or set. Actually, we want set vertex map, not create vertex map. There's a difference where create will create one, but I'm not sure you could actually set the weight. So we want set weight, and what that'll do is it'll create the VMAP. Defaults to weight map. We'll just call it W1. And what it also did is created a select by index sub tool there with all my little guys selected. And you see these dashes here, then a comma, because it's selecting all the verts in the entire row, right? So if I look at it here, and we had these selected, it had all of those verts there, right, in that row, and it just 0 to 39, 800 to 839. So puts them all there in the selection op. And then I'm just going to give it a value. So we'll give it a value of 100%. We can say select map. And so now when I select this, you'll see it has a value of 1, right? Or this one has a value of 0, but every fourth one has a value of 1, right? So that's what we want. So got that down. Now we're going to do another one of these, and we're going to do a slightly lesser value, and we'll do one on each side. So we're going to do one on each side of these guys. So there's 1, and then 1, 2, 3, 4. We want 1 on each side. And then blank, 1 on each side, blank, 1 on each side, blank, 1 on each side, blank, 1 on each side. So it's sort of every other one. It's not sort of every one. It's literally every other one. Could have done that more. It could have just explained that a little bit better. So add VMap or add MeshOp, and we want a set weight again. So we'll do set weight again. And we're going to add it to the same weight map, so W1. So, and the map value is going to be 33% this time. So we've got, these are all 1, and these are all 0.33, right? And then these are 0. Okay, so got all our weight maps in, which is good. And you can just kind of select these and zoom in and kind of see how that works. And then we're going to go back to this view, and I'm going to do a transform. So here's where we start creating our shape, right? And so this is an order of operations, MeshOp's order of operations, and this whole effect is keys on the order of operations. So the first thing we're going to do is just a transform deformer. So just type in transform. It says transform effector. That'll add the effector, which is a locator. So if I show my locators, you'll see it there in the middle, and it adds the influence here. And because I had a weight map selected, it automatically assigns this influence to that weight map, W1. And because now if I press turn off snapping here, if I select my effector and press R for scale and start scaling it out, we can get this sort of more of a star type shape. And this is going to be a little more interesting when it starts doing that twirling. And so, all the verts with, with the 1 weight map. So let's just go back to my curve here and go to verts. You can see everything of the 1 gets pushed out the most, and if it has 0.33, it gets pushed out a third as far, and all these zeros don't get pushed out at all, right? Okay, looks good. We don't even need to see our transform effector anymore, so I'll hide that. Okay, at this point, let's add a replicator to the scene and just kind of see where we're at. So I'm going to add a replicator, and I'm also just going to add a default sphere. So I'm just going to hold down Shift and press the sphere for a sphere here. And in the replicator, we are going to set the prototype to the sphere and the point source to the curve. Now, you get this sort of weird effect, and that's because it's set to align to surface, I believe, which it's meant to work with polygons and align the prototype to the polygon sort of normal underneath it. But dealing with the curve is sort of throwing it off. So I'm going to turn that to point data. And you can see that that's just using the position of the vertices on the curves now. So we've got all these spheres there. They're a little big, so I'm going to select my prototype sphere, go to poly mode, and just sort of squish it down. And this is good enough for now. We'll just do this for now, just for visualization purposes. So I can hide my sphere and just sort of get on with what I'm doing. So on the curve, we're going to do some particle weighting here to get different sizes of spheres. And so this is actually kind of interesting. So add operator and type in remap weight. Now we have a remap weight. You can drag that underneath the transform, so it's right above the 2 weights. And what we'll do is we're going to map type weight map. That's our W1 weight map, okay? And we're going to remap that to a particle size map, and we'll call that P1. You can see our guys all changed here. And if you look at our vertex maps here, we've got a W1 and a P1. Okay, so what happened here? There's a couple things happened here. One, the remap weight is inverted by default. To me, this seems like a bug. I think it's there to show you it's doing something, but I'm just going to set these back from 0 to 100 instead of 100 to 0. And as you can see, like where our weight map was 1, the spheres are full-sized. Where they're 0.33, they're smaller, and where they're 0, they're completely gone, which we don't want. So we're going to remap this curve here. And so I'm just going to click the little gear and select Open in Editor. and kind of mess with it in here. And so we want, you know, our zeros obviously to be moving up, so we want some, you know, size there. I think I'll just look at it this way. I'm going to push our biggest ones up even more, just kind of like this, so they're all just sort of touching a little bit. Maybe smooth it out just a little bit, smooth out our sizes, and something like this. This is fine for now. So there we go. So we've got some different sizes going on. And then let's add some more deformers to kind of whip this thing into shape. So next thing I'm going to add is a twist deformer. So add twist, get a twist defector. Now this is a little weird. For what it's worth, I think MODO's basic bend, twist, taper type deformers all kind of suck. I think they need to be redone in direct modeling. I think they need to be redone in MeshOps. They're ancient, and I think they just kind of suck. That being said, let's get this set up. So we want it on X. You can see it moved to X. And we have this spiral radius. So the radius is, we're going to set to 5. That's going to completely cover our 10-meter long curves, right? So radius is half the diameter. So that makes sense. So we're double 5. And then for twist per unit, you think we want to twist this 360 degrees, but we have to divide that by the number of units, which are meters, 10 meters. So it's 36 degrees per meter to go a full 360, right? See how that works? So if you type in 360 here, it's going to be like 360 degree turn every meter. That's way too much. We just want 36 degrees per meter over 10 meters. It'd be a lot easier if they just had at least you can have these goofy channels here. Call it spiral diameter maybe. So at least we can divide it equally by the twist per unit. Anyway, I'm just complaining about MODO now, but here you see we have kind of a cool shape, right? So you kind of see where this is going. So if I add a bend right now, add a bend effector, turn the length to 10, make sure there it is sticking up there. If we turn it to X, it's going to nicely lay down. Press C for channel haul. We can kind of put this in place, right? Just sort of twirl them over. And we don't want it at full 360 because that's going to put the first point and the last point in the same position, and we're going to have replicas sitting on top of each other, which can kind of flash during rendering. You don't want that, so I'm just going to ease it back just a little bit for now, like this. So they're just kind of touching like that. We'll increase our points to sort of fill in the space in a minute. But okay, there we go. So we kind of got that look, right? It's just not animated. It's not doing anything. So what we need to do to animate this is add a rotation effector. But the key here is we don't want it above the bend. We want it below the bend. We want it to take place before the bend. So if I turn the bend off and just go to perspective here and turn on my locators, and I could turn off that bend and twist effector there. You'll see this locator right there in the middle. In fact, if I go to right, you'll see it right there. That's my rotation effector. You can see it rotating, right? Okay, so that's cool. We're going to start on frame 1. We're going to press Shift E for rotation keyframes. Go to frame 180, press it again, and for X, we're going to just do 360 there. And pop open the graph editor, and you just want this to be linear movement. Or I guess it'll loop either way, but it's probably best best as a linear, sort of most mesmerizing as a linear. So just turn your curve to linear there, curve to linear, there we go. And you can see this sort of spinning around now. So the cool thing is now when we turn our bend back on, like so, and look at it through the camera here, and press play, we get that sort of cool vortexy effect now, right? And all we really need to do is just get more points on our curves to fill in the gaps a little bit and get more of a solid sort of string there. So if you wanted this as the beads, you can probably do that right now. Just, instead of a sphere, make a little bead shape. And then we can render these curves right here. You just click on curve and click on render curves, and those will render. And that'll be our strings. Actually, we'll get to that in a second because that actually is a little bit trickier. So let's just stay on target here, Greg, and finish this one up. So there's a couple ways to do it. You may think like, oh, let's just go down here to curve rebuild and increase our point count to like 100, and that should fix it, right? Or like 80 or something. And the problem is, if you remember, it's all kind of goofy now, right? That's because we used selection indexes in our weight maps, right? And the select by indexes here for our weight maps. And if you do a change your initial point count, it changes those indexes. So it sort of changes everything. So, there's a couple ways you could do it. You can either do more of a procedural selection on the initial points, or we can just, instead of upping our curve rebuild, we can do an edge divide, which will divide the edges of our curves, and it will actually pass those weight map values on so we don't lose those. So if you put an edge subdivide right here, and after the weight maps, it'll subdivide. It's like almost perfect there for us. And it'll keep all those weight map values and particle scale values there. And now we've got a pretty nice looking vortex effect there. And then, yeah, it's like, if we can tweak it a little bit, like this is, we can increase our bin just a little bit to push those, get the channel hall going here. Give me a, whoops, I want to rename bin. I just want my bin effector, and I want to just squish them in just a little more, just like that. That's looking pretty good. And there we go. So if we're going to do the beads, we got to do a little more work here because we have to get the beads to align to the curve. So let's do the beads real quick. So I'm just going to shift click on the capsule. We have this capsule here. Let me just go to wireframe mode. So just make sure you're in polygon mode, and we want to make it about the same size as the sphere, except we actually want it on Z, sort of front to back, so sort of along the Z axis. And I'm just going to sort of squish it together a little bit, like so. I think I can hide my sphere here now. And yeah, it's looking a little bit like a bead. Let's just squish it together a little more. And select these guys, and select these guys, and delete them, and control click boundary. So turn off our weight map, show weight values here. And then, actually I think I'm gonna just do one more. Delete there, like so. Select the boundary, and I'm just gonna bridge those guys, and you can get a couple more guys there. You can do whatever you want. I think we all can make a bead at this point. Can we not? You'll sub D there. Look good. Okay, we got a bead. Call it. Give it a material. Bead. Looks good. Okay, so we need to get this bead. Whoops, I call that guy bead. Whoops, now we've got bead 2. House cleaning, bead. Okay, now we've got a bead about the same size of our sphere. And so with the replicator, we're going to change the prototype to the bead. And then let's turn our replicator back on and sort of pull back out. Now, the problem here, of course, is our beads are not following along our curves here, right? So our curves are not going through the bead. Let me just go to wireframe maybe. You can see our green curves there. And they're not going through the bead. So to get these beads to behave and follow along the curves, we're going to do some stuff in the schematic. So pop open the schematic, close my direct tools here, pop open the schematic. I'm going to drag my replicator down here and just click on both these yellow dots. There's my beads, prototype, and my curves there. I'm going to unplug my curves and drag it this way. And I'm going to add a curves to array node. And what this will do is it'll take these curves in here, like so. And you can see all the little points appearing on the screen. Now this can get slow with a lot of points. Unfortunately, I think in the next version of MODO, or at least one above what I have, they'll have the option to turn those off. But let's turn our steps to 40. So what this is doing is it's resampling these curves, and it's making a point every, or 40 points along the curve, right? You can actually turn the sampling method to parameter. I think that just does a slightly different calculation of the placement along the curve. I think parameter works a little bit better. And then I want another node, and this is called a particle generator. Right here, particle generator. And this is usually to generate like an array or a radial array or a linear array. We can also do a user array. So set it to user, and it's got a user array plug right here in the schematic. So let's plug our curve to array into the user array. So now this array of points, this list of positions in this node that we got from these curves and resampled to 40 points per curve, is now in our particle generator, which we are going to plug into our particle source. Now you'll notice our beads are all in position on the curves, but they're not aligned to the curve. So it's not magically happening yet. We need to set a couple more parameters. First thing in Replicator, instead of point data, we don't just want the position. We actually want to use particle data now. So use particles, because this particle generator is actually going to pass on rotational data as well. And we need to go over to our curves to array, and it'll default it to position, but it'll actually send over all kinds of data, tangents, normals, whatever. Set it to transform, and it's actually going to send over that rotational data as well. And now you can see that our beads are lined up right. And we can also change our steps to, like, say, 60 to get more beads on there. And just click off to get those horrible array indicators off the screen and bring MODO, that brings MODO to its knees. Drop the node, MODO, come on. Okay, so there we go. Now we've got all these beads there, and they are aligned. So we are in business. Now the one thing we did lose is our size, our particle size vertex map. Now there is a way to feed that back into the array. I believe on the MODO Morsels channel, there's a fairly involved tutorial to show you how to do that. And it's fairly involved. I wish there's a super one-click way to get our particle size values that are stored in a vertex map into an array and fed back into the particle generator. But that's okay, we've got fall off, so let's just use a fall off. So I'm gonna pop this back open. I'm going to add a particle modifier and put that between my particle generator and my replicator, and then I'm gonna bump up the particles to like 180%. See how they all got big, but I'm gonna also add a fall off, like a capsule fall off like this. And then let's look at it through the front here and turn on the locator so I can see my capsule fall off, and put it on Z, move it up, and press, let's make sure I get my channel default hauling is going there. You can always reload default hauling on this drop down if you lose it. And I'm just gonna press C and get my radius here. Got it from the side, looks pretty good that way. Got it from the front. I think middle click is solid core, so let's get my solid core out. And here you see I'm getting bigger guys in the middle, but I actually want that to be inverted. So I can just invert my fall off and just sort of mess with it a little bit. And you can see like I have quite a bit bigger beads on the outside than the inside. It just gives it a little more variation. It's a little bit different than the sort of braided look we had earlier with the weight maps, particle VMAP, particle size VMAP, but this is still pretty cool. Looks good. Get your camera centered. So use the variation texture, give it some different colors and all the beads and all that stuff, and it'll start looking like this. And yeah, we're done. Looks cool. Happy Thanksgiving if you celebrate it.
Yum, yum!